let's look at guidelines for effective policy development and implementation. In general, policy is only enforceable if it's properly designed, developed, and implemented. So we need to make sure that we develop a policy that is kind of effective. So for the policy to be effective, they should be properly developed using industry acceptance best practices, and normally they have to be approved by the management. They have to be distributed using all appropriate methods. They need to be readable by all the employees. They have to be understandable by all the employees, and they have to be formally agreed to by act or affirmation. They are also uniformly being applied and enforced as well. We should understand that every company has existing policies, standards, and procedures, and also they could have best practices that they are using. So in most of the situation, we might find ourselves actually involved more in policy maintenance than developing a policy. But let's look at what is useful in developing information security policy. So we are basically viewing it as three-part project. First, in the first part of the project, the policy is designed and rewritten. It can be, if it's outdated, definitely has to be rewritten. In the second part, a senior manager or somebody at the executive level reviews and formally approves that document. And in the third part of the policy development project, management processes are being established to perpetuate the policy within the company. The first part is an exercise in the project management, while the other two required adherence to good business practices. In terms of policy distribution, you might think it's an easy task, but actually getting the policy document in the hands of employee can sometimes require a lot of investment by the organization in order for it to be effective. The most common kind of a distribution is hard copy distribution and electronic distribution. Unless the organization can prove that the policy actually reached the end users, it cannot be enforced. So distribution of classified policy requires additional level of control that the organization needs to think about in terms of labeling the document, in terms of disseminating of the new policy, and in the collection and destruction of the old version to make sure that the confidentiality of the information is contained within the policy document themselves. Another way is, as we said, is electronic way. It could be in email, newsletter, it could be on the intranet of the company, or it could be somewhere on the internet that the employee will have access to it. It could be in terms of a PDF or in terms of HTML document. So normally the document sometimes it's easier to just send it by email, and the employee can actually look at it. But sometimes you can have a place on the internet that the employee can access it, and you always can actually update that document. So you don't have to keep emailing to the employee. They can actually go and look at it at that shared maybe document. Maybe it could be on a shared server, or it could be on the SharePoint, or it could be somewhere on the intranet of the company. The next thing that we need to look at is the policy reading. Sometimes employees have hard time understanding the language that is written in the policies because they might not be literate enough, or they might have some language issues. Also, some visually impaired employees, they require additional assistance. They either through audio or large type version of the document. Multinational organization also, they have to deal with a lot of challenges. Maybe they need to translate the documents in many different languages in order for the foreign citizens to understand that as well. So the policy also should be understandable by every employee in the organization. This in here you can see the readability statistic that's rendered by Microsoft Word for a sample of text that is taken from this chapter. You can see that the grade level test evaluates writing on US grade level 14th it is appropriate for this textbook. This is actually too high for the organizational policy. So if you are writing the organizational policy, you should write it for lower, for a broader range of audience. For most corporate documents, a score of 7 or 8 is preferred. Right now, as you can see, this is level 14. So normally you want to write the document that is a level of 7 or 8. So the policy needs to be actually comprehensive and understandable by all the employees. So you should not use a lot of technical jargon or management terminologies, because the other users might not understand that. The next step is basically to use some form of assessment to see how well the employees understands the policy that you are writing. Quizzes and other form of exam can also be used to assess quantitatively which employees understand the policy by earning a minimum score, and which employee needs additional training and awareness before the policy can be enforced. So maybe you can actually have it in terms of quizzes so that the employees can actually read that material, and then based on that score you can see, okay, if they understood it or they need to, take another training or something like that. Policy compliance means the employees must be agreed to by act or affirmation. Agreement by act occurs when the employee performs a specific action which requires them to acknowledge understanding of the policy prior to use of technology or organizational resources. You might ask, what if the employee refused to agree to comply with the policy? Normally, sometimes it is basically if they are failure to agree to the policy, they are refusing to work, and they may be terminated. So the organization can avoid this dilemma by incorporating policy confirmation statement into employment contracts, annual review, or other documents that's necessary for the individual continued employment. Now let's look at another part, which is policy enforcement. The final component of design and implementation of effective policy is uniform and impartial enforcement. Same as law enforcement, policy enforcement must be able to withstand external scrutiny. Sometimes if an employee, for example, maybe there is a policy that every employee, they have to wear a badge and it has to be visible, and maybe some managers, they don't wear it. If the employee gets punished or dismissed as a result of refusal to follow this policy, and is substantially able to demonstrate that the policy are not uniformly applied or enforced, the organization can find itself facing punitive as well as compensatory damages. So that's why you need to make sure that a policy, if you put a new policy, it has to be enforced. If for whatever reason somebody gets dismissed, or you cannot basically dismiss an employee if not everybody is enforcing that policy. The need for effective policy management has led to the emergence of a new class of software tools that help support the policy development, implementation, and maintenance. Some tool like Vigilant Policy Center keeps policy confidential behind password-protected intranet and generate periodic report indicating which employees have or haven't read or acknowledged the policies. Basically, VPC allow policy developers to create the policy, manage the approval process with multiple individual or group, and disseminate the approved policy throughout the organization. This tool assess readers' understanding of the policy and electronically records readers' acknowledgement. use of this software reduces or eliminates the need to distribute hard copy of document that might go unread. So basically, this software generates those reports that indicates which employee have read it or which one hasn't, or which one has acknowledged it or which hasn't. Now we are going to look at policy development and implementation using system development lifecycle, secure system development lifecycle. Policy development is like any other major project. It has to be well planned, it has to be properly funded, and also aggressively managed to make sure that it is completed on time and within the budget. One way to accomplish this is we are going to be able to use the system development lifecycle. You're already familiar with the system development lifecycle, or another word, secure system development lifecycle in Chapter 3. So the first level of system development lifecycle is investigation phase. The policy development team should attain support from senior management. They should support an active involvement of IT management, specifically the CIO of the company. The policy development team should have clear articulation of goals, participation of correct individuals from communities of intent affected by the policies, be composed from legal, human resources, and end users, assign a project champion with sufficient status and prestige. Also, they have to acquire a capable project manager. A detailed outline of the scope of the policy development project and sound estimate of the cost and schedule of the project needs to be done in this phase as well. Analysis phase should include a new or recent risk assessment or IT audit document, documenting the current information security needs of the company, the gathering of all the key reference materials. Maybe it could include all the best practices, guidelines, and the existing policies that are out there. The third step would be the design phase, which in this phase you are actually drafting the actual policy document. This task can be done by a committee. Sometimes a single person is doing it and then showing it to other people for review. There are a number of references and resources available on the web through professional literature and from peers and consultants that can actually help developing this document. Then after that, the development team or committee basically reviews the work of the primary author and they make their recommendation. Once the committee approves the document, it goes to the manager or executive level for the sign-off. The third phase is the implementation phase. In this phase, the team should create a plan to distribute and verify the distribution of the policies. Members of the organization must explicitly acknowledge that they have received and read the policy. So sometimes the software can help doing that. The simplest way to document acknowledgement of a written policy is to attach a cover sheet that states I have received it, or I have read it, or I have understood it. The employee's signature and date provide a paper trail of his or her receipt of the documentation. Sometimes in terms of a automatic email or something like that, that could work as well. In past, companies use banner or pop-up windows to display end-user license agreements, such as EULAs. In here, this is an example, as you can see, that the user need to just click on agree. That means that they have read this license agreement. And we see that a lot when we are installing a software or something like that. We see a lot of this, and normally the user acknowledge that by clicking on agree. And the last phase is the maintenance phase. During the maintenance phase, the policy development team, they have to be able to monitor and maintain and modify the policy as needed to make sure that it remains effective as a tool to meet challenging threats. The policy should have a built-in mechanism which users can report problems with the policy. Normally it is anonymously. Periodic review should also be put in place into the process. There are a number of other approaches to developing information security policy. One of them is the Woods Information Security Policy Made Easy approach, and the other one is SP 800-18, a guide for developing security plans for federal information systems, which is developed by NIST. In order to develop the policies, it works like a project. Same as information systems and information security project, a policy should have also a champion or a manager. The policy champion position combined with the manager position is called the policy administrator. This person is a mid-level staff member who is responsible for creating, revising, distributing, and storing of the policy. In this changing environment, policies, they have to retain their effectiveness only if they are periodically being reviewed for accuracy and currency. So the policies should always be updated and modified. Any policy document should contain a properly organized schedule of reviews. Normally, a policy should be reviewed at least annually, but sometimes it needs to be reviewed even sooner than that. In order to facilitate policy reviews, the policy administrator should implement a mechanism by which individual can easily make recommendation for revisions to the policy and other related documents. Recommendation method could include either through email or anonymous Dropbox. Once the policy has come up for review, all the comments should be reviewed by the management, and the management needs to approve those changes, and then the changes need to be implemented. In a lot of organizations, policies are being drafted and published without a date, leaving users of the policy unaware of its age and status. This kind of a practice can create some problems, even legal problems, if the employee are complying with an out-of-date policy. Normally, the ideal thing is the policy should have its date of the origin along with the date of any revision that has happened to the policy. Some policies may need a sunset clause, which particularly if they govern information use of a short-term association with second-party businesses or agencies. When you are including that expiration date in there, it prevents a temporary policy from becoming a permanent mistake. So that's it for this part of the chapter. In the next video, I will summarize this chapter. Take care for now.